Alright, I am back with another video, and today we have the patron build for Yeenoghu. For those of you that don't know, Yeenoghu is the patron of the gnolls, and is actually their creator. He's a pretty powerful kind of demon, but he's not on the same level as someone like Orcus or Demogorgon. Demogorgon, which we've covered before. He's a bit more kind of low-key, but otherwise his influence is very well spread. Obviously the fact that gnolls even exist in the world is proof of his existence, and in fact we actually do get to come across the direct result of Yeenoghu's kind of meddling in the early game, because we encounter a pack of gnolls which we end up having to fight, as well as their kind of leader who is a devotee of Yeenoghu called Flynn. And they have one of Yeenoghu's kind of legendary flails that he gives to his devotees, although this one is shattered to the point where it's a mace, so it's lost a lot of its heavenly properties. How heavenly, I should say. Hellish? I don't know, it's not really devil stuff. But anyways, you get the point. So really, we have a pretty strong basis to make this build on, because we have a weapon directly from the patron that we're trying to kind of build around, and as such, we can take use of its unique effects to kind of give us inspiration for the build, as well as Yeenoghu's own powers. We're going to be doing things like turning invisible, making ourselves larger, using fear, and as well as being able to use necromancy to raise undead allies to our side. And not only that, because Yeenoghu's whole battle plan is just to go in as crazy and mad as possible, not only are we going to be inflicting madness on ourselves, but also our summons, and maybe even our party members as well, if they get sick of our bullshit enough. So overall, this build's whole idea is to basically raise a small little militia, and then go crazy with barbarian stuff, and using our unique equipment to kind of, boost up that gameplay style and give us some unique battle strategies, and just overall a very fun lore-based roleplay build. And again, I like the idea of playing this build because it has a direct connection to an event that happens in the game, so you can really feel like you're role-playing it out. Now I will say, while this build isn't designed around the Dark Urge, obviously a lot of people who think of like a madness-crazed murderer are probably going to want to play the Dark Urge storyline. So if you want to justify the Dark Urge storyline like this, you could say, oh yep, you're the Bolspawn, you got knocked out by you-know-who, not the patron Yeenoghu, you-know-who is in the name that I don't want to spoil, just in case, and ended up losing your memories. But then maybe as you're kind of starting to get your memories back as you're kind of playing through the early parts of the game, you come across this weapon from Yeenoghu, which causes you to go completely mad and delve into your base murderous instincts, which is why the Dark Urge kind of works for this playstyle. And I honestly would recommend a full evil playthrough, going absolutely insane with madness and just destroying the world. Nobody lives, nobody survives. Make this the world killer, because I think it could be quite fun. But anyways, let's talk about the actual build now. Let's get into it. First off, we are going to kick things off as a barbarian. Notably enough, it's going to give us constitution saving throw proficiency, which actually could be useful if you want to use some concentration spells with this build for when you're not raging. But really, you should kind of be raging all the time. We're going to gain access to simple and martial weapons, as well as light armor, medium armor, and shields. We are going to use shields with this build, which is kind of why I want to do this, but I believe you could also start with Druid, as we do use Druid levels in this build, and either or will work, but I do like starting with Barbarian just a little bit more to get rage right off the bat, allowing us to deal extra damage with improvised weapons and throwing, as well as melee weapons, and getting those physical resistances as well. We also gain access to an armored defense, which we are going to be using for this build. Now I know what you're thinking, that looks like the Enraging Heart Garb that I use on all of my Barbarian builds, but it's actually not, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. First up now are ability scores as well. We're going to be going with Strength at 16, as it is going to be our main attacking modifier. Dexterity is at 14 for that little bit of AC it gives us, and that head start on initiative. Constitution is at 16 for more unarmored defense, because that's how Barbarian works. Intelligence and Wisdom are both at 8, because it kind of just made sense for this build to not really be very good at those things, and Charisma is at 12 for those awesome Barbarian intimidation checks. Speaking of, our skill proficiencies. I went with the Outlander background today, but obviously if you go with the Dark Urge you will have the Haunted One background, so you may have to adjust these a little bit. But either way, you're going to get Intimidation, which is going to be very fun, because again, if you've not played a Barbarian who's got decent Charisma, the Intimidation checks are absolutely hilarious. So I definitely recommend having those in a playthrough, but with this build, I think you're kind of more likely to just straight up kill someone before the conversation even starts, because you kind of are just that insane. Also, can I just point out that I actually really like the fashion for this one? Not so much the cape, but I really like how the mask kind of melds with everything here. I don't know, I just think it kind of looks cool with the colour scheme as well, but that's just me. Right, that's level 1. Oh, actually, that's not level 1. We have to talk about the species choice here, and that is Duergar. Duergar is optional for this build, however, I highly recommend using it because it gives us two abilities that Yeenoghu is known to use. The first one is the permanent invisibility, which we will get a bit later because he's known for using invisibility magic for like more subtle tactics when he needs to, as well as it gives us the ability to grow larger. Again, another thing Yeenoghu is known to do, so really it does make sense, but I'll discuss those more as we actually get those abilities later on in the build. At level 2 of Barbarian, we're going to gain access to Danger Sense, allowing us to gain advantage on dex saves against traps, spells, and surfaces, which is just awesome. Obviously, it's a great defensive feature for us. And obviously, Reckless Attack to give us advantage on any attack rolls we want. Why not? Makes a lot of sense. Now, at Barbarian level 3, you've got a choice. Obviously, like I say, one of Yeenoghu's abilities is to grow giant, so Giant Barbarian may be in consideration here. But I actually didn't really like it for this build, and by playing Duergar, we already get the ability to enlarge ourselves, so it's not really a huge deal. In fact, we get it at this level. We get the ability to cast Enlarge as an action. I believe this is once per short rest, I want to say, but it gives us a little bit of additional damage, as well as advantage on ability checks of strength and saving throws using strength, which we already get from Barbarian. But that extra bit of weapon damage is nice to have. But for our subclass, now you may think Berserker makes a ton of sense here, and to be honest, you'd kind of be right. Berserker obviously means that we can attack as a bonus action, be able to throw things around, and also have our Frenzy Rage, so if you want to go down that route, you absolutely could. But when me and the community were discussing this, we actually found that Wildheart kind of fit a bit more. Again, Yeenoghu is the creator of the gnolls. They come from hyenas. It's all about that kind of bestial energy. And Yeenoghu also kind of has this whole thing about running with a pack of hyenas. Again, he is a pack leader, just kind of elevated to a very, very powerful degree. So I actually think Wildheart Barbarian here makes a ton of sense. In my opinion, more so than Berserker. We're already going to be going mad. We might as well use Wildheart to gain some benefits, like Speak with Animals. The ability to speak with animals is actually a very fun addition to this build early on, so I honestly do recommend it. But next up, we get to talk about our Bestial Heart. Now obviously we get various different abilities based on which heart we choose, but which one are we actually going to go with? I mean, there's the obvious choice, which is the Bear Heart, giving you resistance to everything. The Eagle Heart would also be a good option for a diving strike if you want to go for that, but honestly, I've got better builds for that kind of thing. Elk Heart for more movement speed and the ability to knock people down. It's kind of in my opinion, not really worth it. Tiger Heart obviously makes sense for spreading bleeding if you wanted to go with that, but we're actually going to be going with the Wolf Heart today. The Wolf Heart is going to allow us to enter a special version of Rage, which will give us access to a move called Inciting Howl. It allows us to, as an action, make it so each ally within earshot can move an additional 3 movement speed. 3 meters of movement speed. So basically, it allows us to give our allies a small buff that's kind of inconsequential. What's actually important here is the fact that we're going to gain a kind of packed tactics feature, allowing our allies to have advantage on melee attack rolls against enemies that are within melee range of us. So basically, if we get up and close with an enemy and surround them with our pack, aka our party members and our summons, they're all going to have advantage on the hit. Throw Rogue Astarion on this party and he is going to have an absolutely amazing time. So honestly, I just really like the idea that we're kind of like, in a weird sort of sense, a team player, going in on this all-evil party who just gangs up on people and absolutely destroys them with advantage on all of their attack rolls. It can actually be really fun. Grab a sneak attacking rogue, grab a great weapon master paladin, and use that advantage to just go absolutely insane. And again, use your summons for even more damage. I don't know, it just felt like a really fun and unique way to kind of get the point across with this character, and it's a lore accurate ability, so I wanted to go for it. At Barbarian level 4, we're going to gain access to our first feat of the build. And again, it's really up to you kind of what you want to take here. I would say there's nothing that's really like overall required for the build other than an ability score improvement, which I do take for strength at this point, but you do have options. Alert can be good, athlete can be good depending on how you kind of do your stats, lucky can help you protect your allies and your summons and such like that, savage attacker obviously makes sense in lore, just continuously going after someone, tough also makes sense if you want a bit more durability. Like honestly, you pretty much do have kind of a free feat choice if you don't mind taking a slight hit to your constitution, so feel free to kind of play around with the different ideas here, but if you just want to play it safe and kind of keep a more standard build, then we're going to be going for ability score improvements in strength and constitution as the build goes on, kicking off with strength just to give us a higher chance to hit with our weapons. Our Barbarian level 5, we're going to get a bit of extra movement speed, but helps with the fact that we're a Duergar, as well as extra attack, which you know we always want. Our total level 5 as well, we're going to get the ability to become invisible, and basically permanently. Like, normally invisibility has a time limit, but in our case it lasts until our next long rest, or as long as we maintain concentration. It only costs an action to use, and there's no resource recharge. It doesn't come back on a short rest or long rest or anything like that. You just get to do this as much as you want, which is kind of cool. Duergar kind of break the game in some ways because of this ability, and this honestly just feels really fun to use. And again, it's part of the checklist that we need for Yeenoghu, so, you know, I think Duergar works really well here. Now, you could go to level 6 and pick up an aspect of the beast here, but I would say at this point you're definitely going to want to multiclass to get the rest of our abilities, and that is we're going to be multiclassing into Druid. Now, I know what you're thinking. Didn't we dump Wisdom? Well, here's the thing. With Druid, we're pretty much only going to be getting summoning and buffing spells. We don't actually need our Wisdom modifier for anything that we're trying to do here, especially since a lot of the powerful Druid spells are based on concentration, which we're not really going to be using while raging. We're just going to be using this purely for the subclass abilities and the buffs, which we'll talk about more in a minute. But for now, we are going to get a couple of cantrips, and since we're going to be making some Barbarian intimidation checks, might as well bring along guidance to make them even better. I mean, if we're going to concentrate on something out of combat, might as well be this. As for your other thing, just grab resistance. It's a similar kind of spell. We also do get to choose our prepared spell for this level. Yes, prepared spell, because again, our wisdom modifier is so low. And really, it doesn't really matter what we take here. We're not really going to be using healing so much. Again, we can't really cast any of this while raging. So honestly, Longstrider enhanced sleep just for the utility. Casting Longstrider for extra movement speed at the start of the day, always a nice thing to have. But if you have another party member, gosh, who can do that, it's probably not worth it. Enhanced sleep obviously can give us a bit more movement as a barbarian. We absolutely love that. We already have Speak of Animals, so we don't need that. Good Berry is good for bringing along a snack, because you can actually cast this, have the good berries in your inventory, and then eat them while raging. So while I usually like to bring a snack as kind of a joke, in this case, it actually is a viable strategy, because we're a barbarian who's going to be, you know, pretty damn tanky. Having an extra source of healing on top of another source of healing that I'll talk about in a minute, this is actually a pretty damn good option for this build, and it's going to synergize with our equipment even better. So now that I'm looking at this, as I'm kind of narrating this video, Goodberry is the optimal choice at level 1 here. That's awesome. Moving on to Druid level 2, we get to choose our subclass, and we're going to be going with Circle of the Spores. Some of you may have seen this coming. Again, Yeenoghu does necromancy. And this synergizes really well with Barbarian, giving us extra temporary hit points, which we get to keep around for longer thanks to our Barbarian resistances, hence why some people might want to pair this with Bear to be resistant to more damage types and be able to, you know, keep those temporary HP points up longer. But while we have those temporary HP points from Symbiotic Entity, which is what we get, we deal additional necrotic damage on our melee attacks. This doesn't require concentration or anything like that, only our wild shape charge and action, so we can keep this up even while raging. It also is going to give us a reaction-based attack that we can use, which is amazing, as well as the Bone Shield cantrip, which may have some usage here and there, but honestly not really. We also do get regular wild shape as well, just in case we do need to traverse the map in any shape or form, and I think it makes sense to have the ability to transform into bestial forms. We're not going to become a hyena or a gnoll, but we can become sort of the next best thing. The badger. Yes. We also don't get to prepare any additional spells here, so keep that good berry on lock. Moving on to Druid level 3, we're going to gain access to level 2 spells, including Blindness and Detect Thoughts. Blindness isn't really going to work for us, but Detect Thoughts can kind of have some fun situations pop up with it, so, you know, might as well keep it around. We also get to choose another spell here. Now, I will say, again, if you're not playing a Duergar, one of the kind of checklist things for Yeenoghu is the fact that he has a few specific resistances, namely to fire, cold, lightning, and poison damage. Duergar come with poison resistance built in, so we don't actually need to have any special sort of thing to make that happen. Seriously, it's weird how much Yeenoghu and Duergar kind of align. So, but if you're not playing a Duergar, then protection from poison is the option for you. You should just spend a spell slot to gain poison resistance and advantage on saving throws against being poisoned. So really, if you don't have that already, this is where you kind of pick it up from. Otherwise though, again, there's not really much here for us. Long Strider or Enhanced Sleep, again, can be suggested, but I do quite like Enhance Ability here, gaining advantage on ability checks with a chosen ability. This can help our Strength stuff, our Con stuff, our Dex stuff, and our Charisma stuff. So overall, if you don't really know what else to spend your spell slot on, outside of combat, use Enhanced Ability to make yourself even better at what you do. At Druid level 4, we're going to get another cantrip. Not really anything we can use here. Reduce Flame can light up a tunnel for you and give you a cool little blue flame effect on your arm. We can prepare an additional spell here, so that we can just grab Enhanced Sleep, I think. And then also we get to choose another feat. Like I say, you've pretty much got a free feat at this point, but I do like having a bit more Constitution on this build, but feel free to pick something else. I am just going to bump up our Constitution though, so we have a nice kind of rounded Strength and Con stat here. At Druid level 5, we're going to gain access to Wild Strikes. This will actually stack with Barbarian's extra attack, so you've got 2 extra attacks, so for a total of 3 attacks in an action, with your Wild Shapes. So if you decide to Wild Shape with this build, there you go. We're also going to get Animate Dead, obviously important for the build. Animate Dead means that we are going to be able to raise dead, funnily enough, which allows us to add to our little pack that we've got going on here, and again, ticks off another box for Yeenoghu's abilities. We're also going to get Gaseous Form. Doesn't really fit the build, but it's there. However, for your next spell, you might as well pick up Plant Growth. Doesn't really fit the build too much, and honestly, like I say, you could take Long Strider here if no one else in the party can use it, but Plant Growth is just another great non-concentration option that you can throw down on the battlefield to restrict your enemy's movement, allowing you to just absolutely wail on them. At Druid level 6, we're going to gain a couple of more Wild Shapes, including the Owlbear Wild Shape, which is my personal favourite, and this one can rage as well, so it just feels right at home with a Barbarian. We're also going to get the Fungal Infestation, allowing us to raise as people that we kill as a reaction with a new unique resource, so it's not using any spell slots, which also means it's not a spell, so we can do this while raging, another fun thing, so we can be in battle, raging, kill someone, and then raise them up as a Last of Us style mushroom corpse. Honestly, it's pretty damn cool and fits Yeenoghu to a T. We also do get to prepare another spell at this point, but honestly, there's not too much left to grab. So, Long Strider. And finally, at Druid level 7, this is where things get a little bit tricky. We get our first level 4 spell slot here, but we actually have a lot of level 4 spells that we want to use. So let's talk about it, or could use, I should say. So first up is Freedom of Movement. Pretty powerful buff for us. Prevents us from being stunned, difficult terrain can no longer slow us down, and we cannot be magically paralyzed or restrained. Those are very nice abilities to have on a battle-raging Barbarian. However, we also do want to build up our pack as well. So the 2 summon spells, Conjure Minor Elemental and Conjure Woodland Being, are also pretty good. So unfortunately, we've got a 1 level 4 spell slot that 3 different spells want to use. That is the biggest downside of this build. Of course, you can always bring along the Spellcrux Amulet, which will essentially give you 2 level 4 spell slots per long rest, which honestly kind of solves the issue, because I actually don't think Conjure Woodland Being fits on this build as much as maybe summoning a couple of Mud Methods or maybe an Azza does. So really, you only need 2 of these spell slots, so honestly, it's not a huge deal. This is probably the setup I would run. So maybe keep the Spellcrux Amulet on you if you want to use both, but otherwise we can just focus on the undead stuff. We don't really need these extra summoning spells, but they are nice to have. Otherwise though, Freedom of Movement, definitely the choice for your level 4 spell slot. It's just to cast it and forget buff, so definitely worth. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a pretty lean, mean fighting machine. You're going to have access to Rage, obviously, as a Barbarian, making you pretty damn tanky. Being able to stack that with the temporary hit points from Symbiotic Entity, a total of 28, which we get from going 7 levels in Druid, that's why we went as high as we did, for pretty much a total of 150 HP is pretty goddamn nice, considering we're mostly taking levels in spellcasting. We also have access to really good roleplay opportunities with our Intimidation, being able to give us advantage on those checks, or use Guidance or Speak with Animals. We have a ton of roleplay opportunities. We get to go absolutely buck wild. We can make ourselves even more tanky with Wild Shape if we so choose, which is just a nice little bonus. Buddy, why'd you turn around, bro? Why'd you turn around? Oh, I forgot. It's been a while since I've actually sat down and recorded. I'm starting to forget how this game works, oddly enough. But also we're going to be able to use things like Animate Dead and other summoning spells, as well as Fungal Infestation with our 4 Fungal Infestation charges, which is really nice. Just have our own little army, our own little pack that is going to be absolutely insane. Again, I'll talk about it more when we get to the equipment in just a second. But yeah, overall you got a lot going for you here. And the fact that Goodberry is actually going to be extremely useful here is just absolutely hilarious. But anyways, let's talk about the equipment and why it's so important to the build, because obviously this whole build is based around the Shattered Flail. This gives us Yeenoghu's gift. Hitting an enemy with this weapon will heal the wielder for 1d6 hit points, but they can go mad if they don't continue to attack an enemy each turn. Madness means that you suddenly become hostile to everyone in the vicinity, so you don't care who's next to you, you don't care who they are, you're just gonna start swinging and hope they die, which honestly fits the build. And thanks to our symbiotic entity, we're packing an extra 1d6 of necrotic damage on top of this, which is pretty nice. There's also a +2 weapon that you can pick up in Act 1. Buff this with the Drakethroat Glaive if you want to make it even more powerful, but it's not necessary. However, you may be noticing a caveat to this weapon. Healing through this item does not trigger other passives that react to healing. I'm going to tell you now that's a bold-faced lie, because I found the one thing it does work with. And I'll get right into that. That is the Periapt of Wound Closure. When downed, you automatically stabilize at the start of a turn. Great for a front-facing tank. But also, whenever you are healed, you restore the maximum amount of hit points possible. This does get triggered off of Yeenoghu's gift, meaning that every time, as a barbarian, you attack someone, you regain 6 hit points. This also works with Goodberry, so that means as a bonus action you can pop a Goodberry in your mouth and instantly gain 16 hit points. Weirdly enough, you're kind of this immortal, bone-swinging, berry-eating barbarian, and that's only a very small portion of the build, so it's honestly a really fun combination here that I think a lot of you can get a lot of usage out of. And anyways, we are a barbarian, which means we get to use a shield, so we might as well. No reason not to take that bump to our AC. And we're going with the Absolute's Protector. For those of you that remember, Flynn, the Yeenoghu devotee, was actually infected with a Mind Flayer tadpole, even though they're a gnoll, meaning that they were loyal to the Absolute. So I threw in a piece of the Absolute's equipment, and I would recommend you get the Absolute's brand in your playthrough. This comes with a few different things, like a +2 to armor class, like most shields, but also gives you a reduction from all damage received from spells by 1 if you have the Absolute's brand. So it's a little bit of extra tankiness for our barbarian. Comes with the standard shield bash, as well as fire shield chill, just to punish people even more for attacking us. Absolutely, why not? And technically, this is cold resistance, which ticks a box, but we do get that in another way as well. That other way being, yes, it's the Darkfire shortbow. You know, okay, so we do see gnolls use bows in the game, so there's no reason for us not to use a bow. We're obviously not really here for the haste buff. We're mainly here for the damage resistances. I mean, we have 4 over there, which actually feels very, very nice, considering they're all kind of the most common damage types. But if you want to have this on a different build, because you'd rather have haste on a build that can actually use it, then feel free. This is not a requirement for the build. This just kind of ticks the boxes of the very specific resistances that Yeenoghu is listed to have. So obviously we want this here. But otherwise, you don't really need to worry about it. But I thought I'd include it because obviously it makes sense for the build. So, starting off for our headpiece here, we have the Cap of Wrath. During combat, whenever the wearer starts their turn with 50% hit points or less, they gain Wrath for 2 turns. I really wanted to focus on Wrath with this build. For those of you that don't know what Wrath is, it allows you to gain a +1 bonus to damage with melee weapons for every turn of the condition remaining. So you can kind of stack turns of Wrath in order to kind of build yourself up and gain more melee weapon damage, which will be really good for us. And I kind of like the idea of mixing Madness and Wrath thematically together, because it just feels like it makes sense. Unfortunately, Wrath can be a little bit awkward. Obviously here, we need to have 50% HP or less, which is kind of meh, especially since we're going to be having temporary HP a lot of the time. Maybe the idea with this build would be to get to under 50% HP, then trigger Symbiotic Entity, so that you have the temporary hit points, so it's easier to stay within that range, and gain 2 turns of Wrath each turn. Definitely could work for you. But obviously there are other ways to gain Wrath, as I'll talk about, but I felt like this was a pretty cool addition to the build that I don't get to talk about often, and I think it does the fashion total justice. However, Yeenoghu is known for spreading fear, so if you feel like you want to upgrade to this in Act 3, pick up the Bone Spike Helmet. I know it's the pretty standard thing to grab, but it does make sense. Whenever you rage, creatures around you within a 3-meter radius must make a wisdom save or take a bit of psychic damage. You gain a +2 to intimidation, which is great obviously for our charisma checks, and you gain the ability to use menacing attack once per turn, dealing a little bit of extra damage and possibly frightening targets. Obviously, this is basically the Yeenoghu helmet, but I really wanted to focus on something a little bit different, just kind of as a new option. So that's why I went with the Cap of Wrath over this, but obviously the Bone Spike Helm makes a lot of sense. And while I've not included it in this video, the Horns of the Berserker, which allow you to deal extra necrotic damage on all of your attacks, but make you take necrotic damage if you don't attack, obviously also fits this build thematically as well, so feel free to go for that. We got the Cloak of Protection here, just for a bonus to our armor class, since otherwise we'd have a slightly lower armor class, but for a Barbarian that's okay, so if this isn't required, just thought I'd throw it on here. And now we have the Blood Guzzler Garb, which I think is a first for the channel. When an enemy damages the wearer gains Wrath for 1 turn. That's, like most Wrath equipment actually, that's slightly untrue. You actually gain 2 turns of Wrath, not 1. Now you may be thinking, well, why didn't we use the Enraging Heart Garb here? It would give us a +2 to Constitution, as well as give you Wrath for every turn that you're raging. Unfortunately, the Wrath part of that equipment is bugged and has never worked, not since release, and even with patch 8 that's still not been fixed. So the only way to get Wrath with our actual armor piece here is to use the Blood Guzzler Garb, and honestly, this feels pretty good. For a frontline fighter who's going to be running in and taking a lot of damage, basically just being able to build up Wrath every time we're hit with our temporary HP and our resistances, just keeping us very, very tanky, we're going to be able to build up Wrath pretty easily between these 2 items, which is probably why most people will want to substitute the Cap of Wrath, because honestly, this kind of just does the job, but otherwise, I still think it's fun to have both on this build. Just me personally. Now next up, the absolute centerpiece of this build, just as much as the Shadow Flail, that is the Abyss Beckoners. You get to share your Barbarian resistances to all of your summoned creatures, your undead, all of it. Maybe pick up the Necromancy of Thay on this build. They become resistant to everything except psychic damage. However, at the start of the summoned creature's turn, it must succeed a wisdom saving throw or also be driven mad, attacking anything in the vicinity, including you or your allies. Now obviously, this is a pretty big buff with a pretty big downside. Obviously for us though, we like both because lore-wise they both make sense. However, the kind of funny thing about this is though, 90% of the things we summon either are unaffected by the madness just because of the nature of their existence, or have such a high wisdom score that they just save anyway. The exception being the fungal infestation zombies. Those guys do fail the check pretty frequently, but otherwise it doesn't matter. If they're in the thick of it with a group of enemies, they're just going to attack whatever's closest to them anyway, so it's honestly not a huge deal. But I thought I'd point it out because it is kind of funny. But the idea that we kind of get to share our Barbarian resistance, like our battling spirit, like our war cry, our pack leader abilities, with our enemies, like with our allies and our summons via the Wildheart and this, it just connects together in a very fun and interesting way, and was an absolute must for this build. And finally, the Bone Spike Boots. Just a bit of extra armor class, while we're not wearing armor or holding a shield, although I have just realized we're holding a shield. Whoops. So you're not going to get that buff to your armor class, unless you want to take the shield off. So overall, it's up to you. Maybe you don't want the shield, but these will still work. Can't believe I forgot that. That was my mistake. However, it's also going to increase our jump distance and give us the ability Brutal Leap, allowing us to pounce on our opponents. And that's what I'm mainly here for. Again, it feels very much like kind of like a Yeenoghu thing to do, to basically just jump on our enemies, knock them to the floor, and then pound them into the dirt. So I felt like the Bone Spike Boots here work. So shield or not, you can go for these. Doesn't really matter. However, obviously, since we have been talking about Wrath, I have to bring up the Linebreaker Boots. These allow you to gain Wrath every time you dash. Now, it says it's only once per turn, and you only gain 2 turns of Wrath, but actually, it's not got that once per turn limit, and you get 3 turns of Wrath. Obviously, this is the easiest way to gain Wrath, but we don't really have a bonus action dash here, unless you take the specific bestial heart that gives you the bonus action dash. I can't remember if it's Eagle or Elk. Remind me in the comments, but otherwise that could work if you decide to go down that route, but otherwise I thought I'd just mention here as kind of an honorable mention, since they are kind of broken. These boots are very busted. Now, we are also going to be packing the Crypt Lord Ring here as one of our accessories, allowing us to use Create Undead once per long rest. If we're going to be summoning Undead, we might as well get a pretty powerful one. And do you want to know something messed up? Okay, every time I want to test a Necromancy build, I obviously need corpses to raise, right? And the easiest way to get
animate dead corpses in Baldur's Gate, Baldur's Gate in Act 3, is to go to this one alleyway where this this children's parents have died. So, but the thing is if you raise them as undead, because they changed this so people don't flee undead anymore, you can literally just raise this child's parents in front of them and literally nobody will react to it. So they just continue having this conversation where they're trying to console this child who's grieving, and I just walk in, raise the parents up as zombies, walk out, and nobody even bats an eye right in front of them. This game is goofy sometimes, and even just saying what I just said is probably going to get me in trouble with YouTube, but I had to point it out, because that's just a wild thing that I just kind of had to do with these videos. Anyways, the final ring is the Spark Spore, giving us resistance to lightning damage and prevention from being electrocuted. The electrocution thing here doesn't matter. This is just mainly here to tick a box, giving us an extra resistance. And again, being resistant to 4 of the most common damage types in the game used by enemies is honestly really nice. In addition to the resistances granted by Barbarian, we're just going to be pretty damn tanky all around. No modded clothing today. This is all the armor that is equipped. He's walked off the screen again. He's left the church. He's gone to karlach. What are you doing? Sir! You are on the other side of a wall! I haven't recorded in like over a week, and this is what happens. Anyways, as I was saying, there is no modded clothing here, but we are using the Kalemvor dye from the Faerunian Colors mod. This video is actually driving me mad, so you know what? I think it's appropriate. But anyways, as I said, this is a very, very fun, interesting build, and probably one of the closest we can get to an actual lore accurate patron build in this game, considering we basically have all of the tools necessary in the game itself, and there actually is an in-game quest tied to this. So I think it's actually pretty goddamn fun. I absolutely love this build. It's the only thing I think it's going to have an issue with is that if you want to get extra attack, which obviously you do, you're going to be delaying your necromantic stuff and your druid stuff, which does kind of suck. But the fact that so the build comes together mainly kind of around level 10 or 11, which is a bit of a downside, but otherwise you will have pretty natural progression. You're still going to be playing that really powerful kind of self-healing barbarian very early on, because a lot of the important equipment for this build is actually Act 1. The Abyss Beckoners, the Shattered Flail, and even the Periapt can all be obtained before Act 2, which is really, really good for us. So honestly, this build's main theme comes online pretty damn quick, and it only gets better from there. And again, if you kind of get access to the right equipment, I mean, in the early game, you could also pick up a kind of an Act 2, you could get the Circle of Bones to be able to use Animate Dead ahead of time as well, and still give them kind of some resistances if you're not using the Abyss Beckoners right away. So you actually do have a lot available to you. And again, having the Wildheart, mixing that with the Abyss Beckoners, it just feels fun. It feels interesting, and I absolutely love it. I actually think this is probably one of the better patron builds that I think we will make, which is fitting considering it's going to be the last one we make for a while. Trust me, we'll come back to it eventually, at some point. But can I just say, for those, the video's over, but for those of you who stick around to, the very end of these things, just so you know, this hiatus that I'm on, this kind of, taking a little bit of a break and kind of uploading a bit more sporadically, it's honestly helped a lot. It has really been positive, especially as kind of, we're getting into the summer months now, and I'm kind of making the last push for this term on my job, and it's just it's just made me so much more relaxed, and I've been in a much better headspace, just not having that constant pressure and expectation. And the fact that you guys have all been so supportive of this decision has just been absolutely amazing, and the channel's been fine as well. Obviously things have gone down a little bit, but it's actually been kind of leveled out at a reasonable point where the channel is actually going to be keeping itself alive, it's going to be self-sustaining for quite a while longer, which is actually really nice. So again, another thank you for everyone who's supporting me on this decision. For those of you who know, I'm going to be taking a hiatus soon from uploading altogether, but I'm still doing little things here and there and kind of experimenting with different things. I'm hoping to get kind of starting the honor mode playthrough that I'm going to be doing on the channel pretty soon. I'm kind of again trying to wait till I have a bit more free time on my hands for the summer holidays coming up, and then I'm actually going to get started on that properly. But otherwise, yeah, video's done. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. All right, goodbye.